You're watching the Randy and Christa Show. I'm Randy Alvarez.
And I'm Christa Orecchio, and this is News That Makes You Healthier. And today we're talking about paleo and autoimmunity with Diane Sanfilippo, who is a New York Times bestseller. She wrote Practical Paleo. She's also a certified nutrition consultant, and we're super happy to have her here. Diane, welcome to the show.
Good. We're excited, actually, to have you on the show. I think both of us eat paleo, and you wrote this quote, this cookbook. So who's the book? Tell me about your book, for those that haven't read it.
Yes. So the book is really divided into 3 sections. So for people who are looking for recipes, but also a lot of the background information about paleo. So how food works in your body, why we're eating certain things and avoiding other things, and specific meal plans for different conditions that people are struggling with. And the book is really a culmination of my work with clients for many years, as well as traveling around the country to teach seminars and learning what the questions were that most people had about this way of eating.
Okay, paleo is a hot topic, but for people that are watching this that are new to it, let's start with a working definition, your working definition of the paleo diet.
Sure. I think the easiest way to understand what paleo really is it's just about eating real whole food and avoiding processed, refined foods. So that's the easiest way to understand it. And what that means in a practical sense, sort of the everyday of what you're eating and avoiding, would be avoiding things like grains, legumes, processed dairy, and sugars and sweeteners. So that's kind of the general gist of it. We're eating meat, seafood, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, and that's pretty much it.
It's hunter-gatherer diet.
That's right.
So I know you talk a lot about using paleo to heal autoimmune conditions. And I love your book, by the way. I love how you give such background and you talk about health conditions. And so tell me more about your experience with using paleo for things like MS or fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and for our viewers who have autoimmune issues.
Yeah, so the big thing here is that about 60 to 80% of our immune system lives in our gut. So that's our digestive system. And the 2 main things that I focus on in my book, Practical Paleo, and in all of my teachings are regulating blood sugar and getting our digestive system working properly. So I can talk about blood sugar a little bit more later, but the real focus when it comes to immune health and autoimmunity is focusing on getting our digestion working well. And so what that means with a paleo perspective is removing the foods that are irritating to our digestive system because we're just not that well equipped to break these foods down. And primarily it's the proteins in the foods. So grains, for example. One really big reason why paleo is super effective is that it's naturally a gluten-free diet. And I'm sure many of your viewers have learned a little bit about gluten-free. And the fact that paleo is naturally gluten-free really helps folks because researcher Alessio Fasano out of Italy has shown how gluten proteins have a very direct correlation to promoting what's known as leaky gut. And I'm sure, again, you guys have probably talked about this a little bit, but what leaky gut means is that our digestive system, our small intestine, is not breaking down proteins properly. When that happens, our immune system flares up because it sees these proteins as invaders. And that's one of the root causes of all different types of autoimmunity. So
Diane, so it's an anti-inflammatory diet, but do you believe, is your belief that this is the way human beings were designed to eat? That this is this is the diet we're supposed to be eating?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer. I've always had the belief that there's sort of a food chain and we should be eating what nature provides. So when it comes to avoiding what comes from factories and packaged processed foods, it's the most logical way to eat. Now, of course, there are nuances within that some folks may feel are a little bit tougher to handle than others. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I just think this is how we're supposed to be eating, real whole food.
So when you eat the way that humans were designed to eat, are you finding that the diseases go away? Things like MS, autoimmune diseases. I mean, is that the word on the street with the doctors or the different health practitioners you talk to? I know in your practice, when you get them eating this way.
Well, I run blood tests, you know, and so I run an IgG blood panel for food sensitivities to see, okay, what's the right formula for someone, because I think paleo is great. You avoid gluten, pasteurized dairy, all of that stuff, but there's also a formula for other things that people could and should avoid.
Right. So when it comes to autoimmune, and this may be something that you've seen in your practice too, Christa, there's even more foods that maybe might be considered paleo friendly that those with autoimmune conditions may also need to avoid. So it gets a little bit stricter and a little more complex, at least for an introductory period of, say, 30, 60, or 90 days. And for those folks who are dealing with autoimmunity, sometimes we also remove things like eggs, nuts and seeds, and nightshade vegetables. And that's very specifically for those who are really struggling maybe with a flare-up of their condition. And so you mentioned before, Randy, if this type of eating sort of cures the disease. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I would say that it supports your body in naturally preventing disease and also putting symptoms into remission. Because once an autoimmune condition has been diagnosed, it doesn't technically get cured, but you can put symptoms into remission to where you don't have to identify yourself as having this disease unless it flares up for some reason. But we really can calm that stuff down and support your immune system.
You've seen people that are in remission then?
Absolutely. I've had people who are dealing with MS who have been in pain for 10, 20, 30 years. And by changing their diet, they're able to go up and down the stairs without pain. And for me, the person who wants to lose weight, 5 or 10 pounds, it's not as compelling to me as this whole, getting our autoimmune conditions under control, because really there's no better way to do it. The medications that are out there suppress the immune system. They don't support the body naturally.
So it's healing from the root cause, which is why paleo is so awesome. And I love that you talked about MS, because we're also interviewing Terry Walls today, who has put her MS in remission with the paleo diet. What about, so I find that if we can use paleo as a healing diet, because it is pretty restrictive. When you start talking about now nightshades and everything else, is that really sustainable? I mean, I don't eat 100% paleo. I'm pretty much an 80-20 balance.
Yeah, Christa, we talked about it, that certain people are okay with grains, and they're not, that's the one thing that they're okay with. The right kind of grains, is that right?
Gluten-free grains, if they're soaked, after you heal the gut.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Leaky
I'm
gut.
curious what she thinks about this.
Okay.
Because you're a diehard paleo, right?
Well, I just personally...
So do you think grains should not be part of this healthy diet?
The way that I see it with grains is that it's not that grains are killing people, right? I mean, I think a lot of folks out there who learn about paleo and they become sort of overzealous about this is the way to eat and these foods are good and these foods are bad. It's not really that. It's just if you're not in a state of optimal health, here are the foods that I think are going to support you in getting to a state of optimal health, and here are the foods I think you should avoid. And so the grains are in the category of I think you should avoid. And primarily that's because exactly what Christa was talking about, soaked, sprouted, fermented grains, those are not the types of things that most people are eating when we talk about grains. It's mostly bread, rice, cereal, pasta, things that are a little bit more refined, and they're not something that has had an ancestral place in our diet. So some of our great grandmothers, for example, were eating grains that were just not the kinds of grains that we're eating today. So I don't have the purest perspective in terms of you can't be healthy if you eat grains. I think there are probably lots of people who are healthy grains.
About your cookbook, because paleo's hot. How do you see your book as different or better than what's out there? And why do people like it? New York Times bestseller. What do they tell you they like about it?
Well, the thing is, it's really not just a cookbook. And when I decided to write the book, it wasn't intended to be a cookbook per se. It's just that I love cooking, and I've grown up cooking and learned how to cook for my parents as well as the Food Network. So I knew that if I wanted to give people information that was the most useful, it would be the why and the how, and not just one or the other. And so that's really what it is. It's the all-in-one, take this book, you're going to learn the background information, and you're going to learn more than you thought you'd learn. And then you're also going to learn how to do it every single day.
And by the way, I apologize about calling it a cookbook. I for some reason thought it was a cookbook. I did flip through it and read it. Christa's read it, so I guess it's not just a cookbook.
It's not just a cookbook. One of my favorite parts is how you start off, Diane. You're talking autoimmune conditions, blood sugar regulation, digestive health, thyroid health. And so within this book, you are driving home the points of functional medicine, which is everything that this show is about, that the body is so interconnected and you can't look at one system without looking at everything, and that digestion is absolutely the cornerstone of our health.
Diane, what's the number one misconception about paleo that you hear that's out there? Is there anything that people say about, well, paleo this or paleo that? The problem with paleo?
I think the biggest I think the biggest one that I get is that it's just too hard or that it's too restrictive. And I think that that idea comes from the person who first learns about paleo from whatever book, usually not from mine, because mine is actually uh, a little more lenient, or I explain the reason behind things. But if somebody learns a list of foods that are okay and a list of foods that are not okay, then they become sort of a zealot without understanding why. And I think that that really confuses a lot of folks out there. They think that I never sip on a hard cider. They think that, it has to be 100% of the time, or you're quote unquote not paleo or something like that. And it's not about a diet, it's about a lifestyle and looking at our food a little bit differently. That's really what most of us who are teaching this stuff, we want to encourage people to understand what's in the food, what we're eating. And it's just a lot more about that than about a
What
diet
is your,
that we do for 30
because we're almost out of time, but what's your best recipe, your most popular recipe from the book that somebody could make tonight?
The most popular recipe would be either the bacon wrapped chicken thighs or the mustard glazed chicken thighs. Those are both super easy, super delicious. Or the balsamic braised short ribs. That's a fantastic recipe. People are always confused about what to do with short ribs, and it's only maybe 5 ingredients. It's really, really easy.
Those all sound delicious. So we always do something to get healthier before our next show. So we're going to split those recipes and make them.
Okay, good. We'll have to do that.
Before we go, I have just 2 quick questions for you, if we can do this quickly. So paleo and blood sugar regulation. One thing I find in my practice that sometimes paleo isn't enough carbs for somebody who's struggling with hypothyroidism. And then the next question is, I get asked a lot is, what about, is it too much fat and congestion for the liver and the gallbladder? So what do you think?
So the carb issue, I actually tackled this right in Practical Paleo. There's a whole chart of paleo-friendly carbs. So I think that most people know that fruit is a good source of carbohydrates, but there's tons of starchy vegetables out there and even plantains that are really great sources of carbs. Good carbs are those that come with nutrition, so the good vitamins and minerals, and the bad carbs are the ones that don't have them. So that's super easy to tackle. That's great for people who have issues with blood sugar or possibly thyroid issues. Also great for athletes to keep in mind that this doesn't have to be a 0 or even a low carb approach. So that's kind of the first one. And then the second one, you were asking about thyroid issues?
No, actually the liver and gallbladder. Sometimes people...
So if you're having issues going from a previously perhaps very low fat way of eating, which is really common, to eating a lot more fat, I have 2 tips here. One is that you go slowly. So we get this idea that we should eat tons of avocado and olive oil and bacon and things like that. But if you weren't eating those before and you're concerned about your gallbladder, just go slowly when you add it. Another thing would be to add a supplement, which would be ox bile. So that's a supplemental assistance in your bile, helping to emulsify the fats that you're eating. So that'll really help things out.
So the bacon, what's your tip on bacon, by the way? Like what type of bacon should you look for if you're going to eat bacon?
Buy it from a local farmer who raises the pigs well, and then bake it to cook it.
What will it say, like no night? I mean, what will it say on there? What are we looking for?
The most important thing when it comes to bacon is how the pig was raised and what it was eating, if it was eating organic, non-GMO feed. But pigs can eat pretty much anything, and the nitrates are not something I generally have people be concerned about. You get more nitrates from a salad than you do from bacon.
Okay.
Yeah, so pasture raised. That's the buzzword you're pretty much looking for, is pasture raised when you're getting meat.
I posted on Facebook about that I had bacon one morning. And a lot of people go, I can't believe you're eating bacon.
Yeah, it's all about quality. You got to respond. How did you respond? It's all about quality?
I didn't respond to it. Okay. I didn't. It would have taken some time. But look, we're almost out of time. What is your message? Somebody that wants to adopt this lifestyle, that they want to take a closer look at paleo. What's your message to them that they think it's too restrictive? They're afraid. They think there's no fun, right?
I think it's really important to learn the truth about what the movement is about instead of getting wrapped up in is this paleo, is it not paleo? So that's kind of the first thing. Get to understand the whole point of it and go slowly. I think some people get really intimidated because they feel like today they're eating these things and tomorrow they can't or they shouldn't. And I think it's important to take some baby steps if you're overwhelmed and get involved in a community. And I think that's really where this community, the paleo ancestral health community, has become really warm and embracing. And we're here to just teach people kind of how to navigate through it all. So yeah, and grab my book because
Do you have a blog that you write every week?
Yeah, balancedbites.com is the blog. I also have a podcast every single week that's free. And Practical Paleo will be your start to finish guide of how to kind of get through this.
Okay, good.
Fantastic.
Christa, final comments?
Final comments. No, it's really refreshing. This is the first time that we've met Diane, and I appreciate having you on the show. And I love that it's not this, militant approach to paleo. And I thank you for sharing all of your thoughts.
All right. I want to thank you, Diane, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Good. We're going to take a quick break. You're watching the Randy and Christa show. We'll be right back.